Behind the door of Class 3B, Officer Sarah Miller stood frozen, her police badge cold against her chest, as her daughter Ava, balancing on a metal prosthetic leg, shook under the quiet cruelty of the teacher everyone admired. A soft remark, wrapped like kindness, became a blade that cut deeper than any injury Sarah had ever treated in the line of duty. The class laughed, not out of evil, but out of the silence that follows when no one is brave enough to stand up. And in that moment, Sarah realized this wasn't discipline. It was humiliation disguised as care, and her child was its target. Stay with this story. If it moves your heart, subscribe, share your thoughts, and help us spread stories that restore faith in kindness. A thin morning fog drifted over Pine Ridge, soft and pale, clinging to the schoolyard like a memory that refused to leave. Sarah Miller stood at the bottom of the steps, the wood creaking gently under her boots. She was 40, tall with a fit build, light skin touched by years of sun, brown hair tied low beneath a navy police jacket. The gray shirt, black tactical pants, and worn brown boots marked her trade. She spoke with a calm voice, steady from years of night calls and early mornings. Beside her stood Ava, 8 years old, small and quiet, her blonde hair falling to her shoulders, a cream blouse and navy cardigan pressed neat by Sarah's careful hands. The metal prosthetic leg shone under the early light. The 2 aluminum crutches rested under small arms that had learned balance too early. At Sarah's side, Max waited. A 6-year-old German shepherd, large and muscular, sable coat, warm against the cold air, a black saddle down his back. He wore a plain collar with a metal tag engraved with his name. His ears twitched at every sound, as if the world still asked something of him. Sarah breathed once, letting the cool air settle inside her chest. She whispered, more to herself than anyone, "First day, kiddo." They walked the hallway of Pine Ridge Elementary, the linoleum polished smooth from decades of small footsteps. Children gathered near the lockers, voices high, the sound of a childhood Sarah remembered faintly, as if through glass. Inside Class 3B, Linda Hale arranged papers. She was 38, light skin, soft brown curls framing her face, a pale gray blouse, and a charcoal skirt falling to her ankles, a lavender scarf tied with care. Her voice was smooth, warm enough to gather trust, the kind of tone Sarah had learned to listen through, not into. She introduced Ava to the class. She smiled, and without pause said gently, almost kindly, "Careful, dear. Not everyone can stand steady with only one leg." For a moment, silence hung. Then laughter, light, sharp, thoughtless. Sarah stood in the doorway, her breath caught, her hand tightening around the strap of her jacket. Ava trembled, gripping the crutches harder. Max's fur lifted along his spine, a low growl rising from deep in his chest. It was quiet, but Sarah heard it as if the dog spoke her own thoughts. Something old, something unseen. Danger without noise. She met Linda's eyes, searching for cruelty or clumsiness, and found nothing clear. Only calm, or the mask of calm. Sarah nodded once, as if leaving her daughter was the right thing, but fear pooled under her ribs like cold water. Outside, the morning had grown bright, the fog thinning above the pines. Sarah walked to the parking lot with Max at her heel. Each step felt heavy, like the ground resisted her leaving. She leaned against the truck door, fingers resting on the metal, remembering a hospital room and the slow rhythm of machines, the moment she whispered to the small child in the bed, "I will keep you safe. Now." She wondered if promises made in grief could survive an ordinary school day. Max stared through the window toward 3B, his body stiff. Sarah followed his gaze. "You feel it too," she said softly. In the stillness of her heart, a quiet vow returned, simple and old as breath. Whatever waited behind that door, she would not look away again. Rain pressed lightly against the windows that week, a quiet tapping like a worry someone tried to ignore. Ava walked the hallway of Pine Ridge Elementary with the caution of a child who had learned to make herself small. She was 8, blonde hair tucked behind one ear, cream blouse neat as if order could keep fear away. The prosthetic leg moved in a slow rhythm, metal catching the dull light. In Class 3B, her hands gripped the aluminum crutches, and she stood when told, reading sentences she could barely see through the heat rising in her face. Linda Hale guided the room with a practiced grace. The 40-year-old teacher wore a pale gray blouse and a lavender scarf, voice soft and measured, eyes steady like polished glass. She believed in strength the way some people believed in prayer. Each task she gave Ava climbed higher, wiping chalk from the top of the board, carrying stacks of books pressed against thin arms, standing longer than others to read aloud. The room chuckled, sometimes openly, sometimes under breath. Ava whispered at night, "I'm okay," because she wanted it to be true, not because it was. Max waited each morning at the doors, his sable coat damp from the rain. 6 years old, a German shepherd trained for danger, he understood tremors the way others understood speech. When Sarah dropped Ava off, he sat beside her truck, eyes fixed on a single window. His body grew tense, ears pricked forward, a low rumble deep in his throat. Sarah felt it in her chest, like a tug on an old bruise. She noticed bruises on Ava's wrist, small circles, as if something had gripped her too hard. At the dinner table, Sarah asked, voice gentle from years of learning not to frighten truth away, "Did someone hurt you?" Ava shook her head, eyes lowered. "I tripped," she said. Sarah remembered a hospital bed, the slow beep of machines, the weight of guilt that never lifted. She wondered if pain returned in circles, like weather that comes back even when you close the window. In Class 3B, Ethan Brooks and Lily Carter watched from the second row. Ethan was 9, slim, brown hair falling near his eyes. Wearing a navy hoodie, he pulled close when nervous. He saw things most children didn't, moments between words. Lily was small, glasses too large, pink sweater warm against her quiet nature. They picked up Ava's pencils when they fell. They sat beside her at lunch without speaking, sharing time instead of advice. Their classmates called them the Pity Squad, laughing with the freedom of children who have never learned what cruelty costs. Linda believed she was molding Ava, smoothing weakness into strength. In her youth, her father's voice had been cold metal. Don't be soft. No excuses. She learned to survive by becoming unbreakable. Now she shaped a girl the way she had been shaped, without seeing the cracks it caused. The lavender scarf at her neck was the only softness she allowed herself. Sarah drank her coffee slowly each night, kitchen light falling across the table like a thin bridge between past and present. Rain on the roof made a gentle rhythm, like footsteps going somewhere she could not follow. Ava slept, curled around Max, her hand on his thick fur. Sarah watched through the doorway, breath held the way a person holds a prayer. She knew fear could make a child silent. She also knew silence could turn pain into memory that never heals. In the quiet, Sarah felt something change, not loud like anger, but steady like resolve. She whispered into the room, "You don't have to be strong alone." Max lifted his head, eyes open in the dim light, as if he understood the promise. Clouds hung low over Pine Ridge that morning, the kind that hold rain without letting it fall, as if the sky also kept a secret. Ethan Brooks sat in the second row of Class 3B, a quiet place near the window where dust moved in thin lines across the light. He was 9, slim with brown hair half covering his eyes, wearing a navy hoodie that smelled faintly of laundry soap. His voice was soft, the kind children forget to hear, but his mind noticed things. Pauses, small looks, tension like a string pulled too tight. He slipped a small recorder into his backpack, the red light blinking once beneath the flap. He did it without drama, only the slow rhythm of breathing, the way someone brave learns to be brave without feeling it first. Ava stood at the front again, 8 years old, blonde hair combed smooth, cream blouse neat, her metal leg shining under the fluorescent lamps. Linda Hale stood beside her in a pale gray blouse and lavender scarf, a picture of composed elegance. Her voice lowered, almost kind, but the words were cold metal. "Do you think people will pity you forever? The world owes you nothing. Stop expecting it." Silence followed. No laughter this time, only a stillness that felt heavier than noise. Lily Carter watched from near the door. She was 8, small with long brown hair and glasses too large for her face, wearing a pastel pink sweater. Her hands folded on her desk. She saw Linda's fingers lift Ava's chin, her grip firm, forcing the child to look up. Ava's eyes filled, not with tears that fell, but with tears held back, as if crying would make the room smaller. Lily heard Ava's breath tremble. She looked around. Every child stared at the desk, the wall, the floor. No one looked at Ava. And in that quiet, Lily understood something painful. Silence could be louder than cruelty. Linda believed she was teaching strength. She repeated her father's voice without seeing the harm. Lily's fingers curled around the edge of the chair. She felt a warmth rise in her, like a small flame afraid of wind. She wanted to speak, but her voice stayed inside her chest, a place too tight to open. The recorder blinked again inside Ethan's backpack, catching words that would matter later, though no one knew it yet. After school, the sky had darkened. Rain finally found its way to earth, soft drops tapping against the metal bike racks. Ethan waited near the chain-link fence. His hoodie was damp at the shoulders, shoes muddy from the walk across the yard. Lily arrived, breathing fast, her glasses dotted with rain. They didn't speak at first. Children passed by laughing, unaware of the weight 2 small hearts carried. Ethan pulled the recorder from his bag, the metal cool in his hand. "It got everything," he said, voice shaking, even though he tried to hold it steady. Lily nodded. She had seen what words alone could not prove. Their eyes met, filled with fear and something else. Resolve, unpolished, but real. Ethan understood. They needed more, not because truth was weak, but because a child's truth was small in the world of adults. "She only does it when no one sees," he whispered. Lily wiped her glasses with her sleeve. "Then we'll watch," she said. The rain fell quiet around them, like a curtain closing over a moment that would matter later. Ethan placed the recorder back in his backpack as if storing a fragile thing. In the fading light, he whispered a promise no one heard, to stand, even if his voice shook. Above them, the clouds drifted slow, releasing rain the way fear releases tears, one drop at a time. The morning was cold enough that breath rose like smoke, drifting over the schoolyard in thin, quiet ribbons. Sarah walked toward the parking lot, boots pressing frost on the pavement. Her navy jacket held the night's chill, and her hair was tied low beneath the collar. She glanced once toward the school windows, the way a mother checks a door she knows is locked, but doubts herself anyway. Ava had walked inside moments earlier, small shoulders under a navy cardigan, blonde hair brushed smooth, the metal leg clicking softly on the hallway tile. Max stood beside Sarah at first, his sable coat catching the pale light, ears twitching with every sound behind the walls. He was 6, a German shepherd with years of training still living in his muscles. As Sarah turned to open the truck door, Max stiffened. His whole body coiled tight, tail rigid, breath sharp, eyes locked on the distant classroom. Before Sarah could speak, the leash snapped from her grip. Max lunged forward, running hard and straight, as if every instinct he ever learned pointed to one place. Inside Class 3B, the door burst open with a heavy thud. Wood struck the stopper, echoing through the room. Children froze. Linda Hale stepped back, pale scarf shifting at her neck. Max stood between her and Ava, fur raised along his spine, teeth bared without confusion, only certainty. His bark cut the silence, deep and raw, a sound older than language. Ava stood behind him, hands shaking against her crutches, eyes wide, not from fear, but from something new. Protection she had never felt this strongly. Linda's voice faltered in her throat. Her pale gray blouse rustled as she lifted a hand, not in gentleness, but in the old habit of control. Sarah ran through the hallway. Her boots hit each tile like a heartbeat. When she reached the doorway, she saw the red marks on Ava's neck, small circles like fingers pressed hard. The room swayed for a moment. Sarah's training did not rush in. It settled cold and precise. This was not a fall, not a stumble. It was a hand and force. The kind adults pretend not to see. She stepped forward, her voice low. "Ava, come here." The girl moved, Max pressed close, his body a wall of fur and warmth. That evening, Sarah's kitchen glowed with the warm hum of a small lamp. The light fell across old wood, cups half full of tea, and a pile of papers Emma Bennett had brought. Emma was 42, tall with tired kindness in her eyes, wearing a white nurse blouse beneath a green cardigan. She had worked at the school for years, watching children grow into themselves. She spread the files out. 4 students from Class 3B, each injury marked the same way. Slipped, fell, accident. Ethan and Lily sat close together, damp sneakers on the floor, a recorder between them. Ethan pressed the button. Linda's voice filled the room, clear and sharp. "The world owes you nothing." No pity in it, only disdain. The words seemed to stretch the air thin, until no one breathed. Lily's eyes filled with quiet grief. Max lay at Ava's feet, head heavy on her leg, watching the room like an old guardian. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. She thought of all the nights she held Ava's hand in a dim hospital room, promising safety she was still learning how to give. When the recording ended, silence settled like snow, soft, heavy, absolute. Sarah looked at Ethan, Lily, then Emma. She spoke slowly, each word as steady as her breath. "We bring this to the board." She rested her hand on Ava's shoulder. "Not just as a cop," she whispered, "but as her mother." Max lifted his head, eyes following her voice, as if he already understood the path ahead. Dawn touched Pine Ridge with a pale gold, washing the rooftops like a quiet blessing. The community hall smelled of old wood and coffee, left to cool in paper cups. Sarah sat near the front, spine straight in her navy police jacket, brown hair tied low against her neck. She was 40, but today the years felt heavier, as if every night in the hospital and every silent ride home had gathered in her shoulders. Ava sat beside her, small legs swinging gently, metal prosthetic glinting in the morning light. The child wore a cream blouse and navy cardigan, blonde hair brushed neat. Her hands rested on Max's thick fur. Max, 6 years old, sable coat warm against cold floors, watched the room with steady eyes, ears pricked, breath slow, as if guarding something fragile. Across the table, Linda Hale tried to hold Grace. 38, pale gray blouse pressed sharp, lavender scarf wrapped soft around her neck. Her voice trembled in places she tried to hide. 5 adults on the school board watched her speak. Their pens hovered over paper, their faces lined by age and the quiet exhaustion of people, meant to choose what is right. Sarah listened. Linda's tone rose, words speeding, face flushed. She spoke of discipline, expectation, strength. But on the table lay the records Emma Bennett had gathered, 4 files marked accident, each one a bruise shaped like a hand, and beside them the recorder. Ethan pressed the button. Silence parted. Linda's voice filled the room. "The world owes you nothing. Stop expecting pity." Not anger, something colder, shaped by fear. In the back row, Ethan and Lily sat close. Ethan was 9, leaning forward, brown hair falling toward the recorder in his hands. Lily, 8, pink sweater soft as the morning light, glasses reflecting the board's faces. They looked older than they were, not in years, but in the way truth ages children who choose to carry it. Emma Bennett stood nearby, a woman of 42, white nurse blouse beneath a green cardigan. She did not speak much. Her eyes carried the weight for her. When Linda raised her voice louder, when her face turned red with panic, something in Emma's quiet stare seemed to hold her accountable, not through judgment, but recognition. The board voted. 4 slips of paper placed side by side. When the chairman lifted his gaze, the room held its breath. "Suspension," he said, "effective immediately, and a formal investigation." Linda's hands shook. The lavender scarf seemed too soft for her anger. As she passed Sarah in the aisle, Sarah spoke gently, without triumph. "You don't scare her anymore, and that is what frightens you." Linda stopped, just once, as if hearing for the first time the echo of a life she never healed. A month later, winter slipped into pale spring. Class 3B looked different, new posters in bright colors, desks arranged in soft rows. Mr. Turner stood at the front, mid-40s, wearing a dark gray sweater. Over a white shirt, hair silvered at the temples, voice gentle enough that children leaned forward to hear. Above the board hung a wooden sign, hand-carved letters, uneven but full of care. No one left behind. Each morning he asked, "Tell me one good thing today." Children learned to listen, not with judgment, but with quiet acceptance. When Ava raised her hand to read aloud, voluntarily, the class fell silent. Her voice shook, thin as winter branches, then steadied. Ethan smiled toward her. Lily nodded once, small and sure. When she finished, the applause was soft, like snow falling, no mockery, only pride. Ava smiled, a real smile, the first since arriving to 3B. That afternoon, the school held a small assembly in the gym. The floor smelled of varnish and chalk dust. The principal lifted a small plaque, "Guardian Shepherd of Pine Ridge." Max tilted his head at the applause. Sarah spoke from the stage, voice low and clear. "Heroes don't always wear badges," she said. "Sometimes they are children who choose what's right, and sometimes heroes walk on 4 legs." Ava hugged Max tight. "That day," she whispered, "I stood up because he stood first." At home, the fire warmed the room. Ava's prosthetic leg shone in amber light, not as loss, but triumph. She leaned into Sarah. "I want to protect people someday," she said, "like you, like Max." Sarah held her close. Max rested his head on Ava's leg, eyes half closed, as if making a promise, quiet and certain, that she would never face the world alone again. In every life, there are storms we face alone. Illness, loneliness, memories that ache like old wounds. But this story reminds us, compassion is a quiet strength. Just as Ava found her courage through love, we too can find light in days that feel heavy. If you're watching this from a small room with medicine on the table and silence in your home, remember, your kindness still matters. Speak hope, share your story, leave a comment for someone who needs it today. Subscribe to join a family of hearts that care. May God bless you with comfort, healing, and gentle days ahead.